A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You know, Herman, I was looking at the shipping data for the Red Sea this morning, and it is just staggering. We are seeing a fundamental shift in how global trade works, and it is all because of a group that, 20 years ago, most people outside of the Middle East had never even heard of. It really makes you realize how much the world has changed when a non-state actor can basically hold the global economy hostage from a few rocky outposts in Yemen. We are not just talking about a temporary disruption anymore. As of this week, in March 2026, we are looking at a permanent restructuring of the maritime map.
It is the ultimate case study in asymmetric power projection, corn, and honestly, it is something we have been tracking for a long time on this show. Our housemate Daniel actually sent us a prompt about this recently, asking us to dive deep into the Houthis, their history, their operations against Israel, and that bizarre fractured political landscape in Yemen where you have two different groups claiming to be the government. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way, for those of you joining us for the first time or the 1000th time.
And I am Corn Poppleberry. We are glad you are here. This prompt from Daniel is timely because, as we sit here in Jerusalem on March 18th, 2026, the situation in the Red Sea has moved past the point of a crisis and into a new normal. We are talking about a group that has evolved from a local revivalist movement into a regional power player with a seat at the table of the axis of resistance. They have effectively turned the Bab el-Mandeb, the Gate of Tears, into a toll booth that only they control.
And to understand how they got here, we have to look past the headlines of drone strikes and missile launches. We have to look at the roots of the movement, which go back to the 1990s. People often think the Houthis are just an Iranian invention, but that is a major misconception that ignores 1,000 years of Yemeni history. They started as the Believing Youth, or Muntada al-Shabab al-Mumin, a Zaydi Shia revivalist group in northern Yemen. They were reacting against what they saw as the encroachment of Saudi-funded Wahhabism and the corruption of the Yemeni state under Ali Abdullah Saleh.
Right, and it is important to emphasize that Zaydism is a distinct branch of Shia Islam. It is often called the Fivers branch. It is actually quite close to Sunni jurisprudence in some ways, which is why the Houthis were able to gain a foothold in a country that is roughly 60% Sunni. But as they became more militant, they adopted that famous slogan, the Sarka, which includes death to America and death to Israel. That was not just rhetoric. It was a foundational identity forged in the fires of the 6 wars they fought against the central government between 2004 and 2010.
It became their brand. And by the time they took over the capital, Sana'a, in 2014, they had transitioned from a mountain insurgency into a proto-state. They forced the internationally recognized government into exile, and that set the stage for the massive civil war and the Saudi-led intervention. But fast forward to today, and the reality on the ground is a dual-state situation. You have the Houthi-controlled north, where the vast majority of the population lives, and then you have the Presidential Leadership Council, or the PLC, in the south.
And that is where the tension lies. The PLC was formed in April 2022 to try and unify all the anti-Houthi factions, but they have struggled with legitimacy and internal infighting. Meanwhile, the Houthis have spent the last decade building a sophisticated military infrastructure with significant help from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. We covered some of those missile capabilities back in episode 941, but what we are seeing now in 2026 is a whole new level of technical integration. They are no longer just receiving crates of weapons, they are operating assembly lines.
It really is a technical marvel in a dark way. The transition from simple anti-ship missiles to what we are seeing today is what I find most fascinating. They are not just firing blindly. They are using loitering munitions and unmanned surface vessel swarms. And here is the thing most people do not realize. They have adapted Iranian designs to work within the specific geography of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is one of the world's most critical choke points, only about 20 miles wide at its narrowest.
That geography is their greatest weapon. If you control the heights overlooking that strait, you do not need a massive blue water navy to disrupt global shipping. You just need a few truck-mounted launchers and a steady supply of drones. I was reading a report the other day about their 2026 tactical shift. They have started using artificial intelligence, assisted target acquisition to distinguish between commercial tankers and naval vessels. They are using edge computing on the drones themselves to identify hull shapes and heat signatures, which makes it much harder for coalition ships to provide a defensive umbrella using traditional electronic warfare.
And that brings up the failure of Operation Prosperity Guardian. The United States and its allies put together this massive naval coalition to protect the shipping lanes, but the cost per kill ratio is totally unsustainable. You have an American destroyer firing a $2 million interceptor missile to take out a Houthi drone that costs maybe $20,000 to build. You do the math on that, and it is clear who is winning the war of attrition. The Houthis are forcing the West to spend billions just to maintain a shaky status quo, while they can replenish their drone stock for the price of a luxury car.
It is a classic example of what we call the democratization of precision strike. Capabilities that were once reserved for top-tier nation-states are now in the hands of a group that the media used to describe as wearing sandals and living in caves. But they are not just in caves anymore. They have repurposed the entire infrastructure of the Yemeni state. They are using the naval bases, the radar stations, and the intelligence assets of the former Yemeni Navy. They have even integrated civilian radar from fishing vessels and port authorities into their targeting network.
That is a key point, Korn. They are not just a militia, they are a functioning military administration, and they have used the narrative of the conflict with Israel to consolidate their domestic power. Since the escalations began, the Houthis have framed their blockade as a direct support for the Palestinian cause. Whether you believe that is their true motivation or not, you cannot deny how effective it has been for their recruitment. It has silenced a lot of the internal dissent within Yemen because anyone who opposes the Houthis is now framed as a supporter of the Zionists.
It is a brilliant, if cynical, political move. They have taken a complex internal power struggle and mapped it onto the most emotive issue in the Arab world. And the PLC, the official government in the south, is stuck in a terrible position. If they criticize the Houthi attacks on shipping, they look like they are siding with Israel and the West against a fellow Arab group. But if they stay silent, they concede the mantle of Yemeni sovereignty to the Houthis. It is a win-win for the leadership in Sana'a.
The PLC is effectively sidelined. They are based in Aden, but even there, they have to deal with the Southern Transitional Council, which wants an independent South Yemen. It is a mess of competing interests. And while the official government is struggling for legitimacy, the Houthis are the ones actually making waves on the global stage. As of this month, Suez Canal traffic is down 40% compared to 2023 levels. That is a massive blow to the Egyptian economy, which is losing billions in transit fees, and a huge disruption to European supply chains.
I saw a report that some of the major shipping lines, like Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, have basically given up on the Red Sea for the foreseeable future. They are rerouting everything around the Cape of Good Hope. That adds 10 to 14 days to the journey, and massive fuel costs. This is not a temporary detour. This is a permanent restructuring of global trade routes. And it gives the Houthis, and by extension their partners in Tehran, a permanent lever over the global economy. They have proved that they can increase the price of a gallon of gas in Ohio, or a laptop in Berlin, from a mobile launcher in the Yemeni desert.
You used the word partners there, Korn, and I think that is important. There is this ongoing debate about whether the Houthis are Iranian puppets or independent actors. From everything I have researched, the truth is somewhere in the middle. They are definitely part of the axis of resistance, and they rely on Iran for the high-end tech, the guidance systems, and the technical advisors from the IRGC's Quds Force. But they also have their own local agenda. They are not taking orders from Tehran on every single tactical decision. Sometimes they are even more aggressive than the Iranians would prefer, using their autonomy as a shield for Tehran to maintain plausible deniability.
That autonomy is what makes them so unpredictable. If they were just a puppet, you could negotiate with the puppet master. But the Houthis have their own internal logic. They are driven by a combination of Zaidi religious fervor and a very practical need to stay in power in a war-torn country. By attacking Israel-linked shipping, they have elevated themselves from a regional nuisance to a global player. They are now a factor in every major geopolitical calculation in the Middle East. They have effectively forced their way into the room where the big decisions are made.
And we have to talk about the physical reality of their missile frontier. They have evolved their systems to bypass traditional radar detection by using low-altitude flight paths and terrain masking. They are launching from mobile platforms that are hidden in residential areas or deep in the mountains of Tayas and Saada, making it nearly impossible for coalition airstrikes to truly eliminate the threat. You can hit a warehouse here and a launcher there, but the decentralized nature of their operations means the wall of fire, as we called it in episode 941, remains intact. They are using the very mountains that protected them during the Civil War to protect their new naval capabilities.
It is also interesting to look at how Israel has responded. We talked about this in episode 1130, but Israel has had to pivot its strategy. They are looking at a new base in Somaliland and increasing their presence in the Red Sea, because they realize they cannot rely solely on international coalitions to keep these lanes open. The Houthis have effectively forced Israel to think about its southern maritime flank in a way it has not had to since the 1960s. It is a multi-front war, and the Red Sea is now a primary theater.
It is a total paradigm shift. And it is not just Israel. The Houthis have targeted ships from dozens of different countries. They claim they are only targeting ships linked to Israel or those heading to Israeli ports, but in practice their targeting has been much broader and often quite erratic. They have hit Russian tankers, Chinese vessels, and ships carrying humanitarian aid to Yemen itself. It shows that the blockade is more about demonstrating power and creating a general state of insecurity than it is about surgical precision. They want the world to know that no one passes through the Bab el-Mandeb without their tacit permission.
So, where does this leave the official Yemeni government? The PLC is sitting in Aden, trying to manage a collapsing currency and a humanitarian crisis, while the Houthis are the ones dominating the international news cycle. There were those UN-led peace talks back in February, just last month, and the signs point toward a formal partition of Yemen. It seems the international community is starting to accept the reality that the Houthis are not going anywhere. The talks in February were less about reunifying Yemen and more about managing the two-state reality.
That is the tragic reality for the people of Yemen. The country is effectively being carved up. You have the Houthi-controlled north, which is becoming a sort of revolutionary Zaidi state, and the south, which is a patchwork of different militias and the PLC. The Houthis have used the Israel-Palestine issue to justify a massive internal crackdown. Since late 2025, they have arrested thousands of people, including NGO workers and anyone they suspect of being a fifth column. They are using the external war to finish their internal conquest.
It is the classic playbook for an authoritarian regime under pressure. Create an external enemy to justify internal repression. And because they have this high-tech arsenal, they can actually strike that external enemy, or at least its perceived interests, in a way that feels meaningful to their supporters. It is a very potent mix of ideology and technology. They have managed to marry 7th century religious grievances with 21st century drone technology.
I think we should dig a bit deeper into the technical side of their drone and missile supply chain, because that is really the heart of their power. It is not just that they get crates of missiles from Iran. It is that they have built local assembly plants, often underground. They take the Iranian designs, like the Shahed series or the Quds cruise missiles, and they modify them. They use commercially available components like GPS modules and flight controllers you can buy on the open market and integrate them into these weapons. This makes the supply chain incredibly resilient.
Right, and that makes the sanctions regime much less effective. You can try to stop the shipment of high-end military tech, but it is much harder to stop the flow of dual-use electronics, and the Houthis have become experts at smuggling. They use dhows and small fishing boats to move components across the Gulf of Oman and into Yemen. Once the parts are there, they have the technical expertise, often trained by Hezbollah or the IRGC, to put them together. It is a distributed manufacturing model that is very hard to target with traditional airstrikes.
Hezbollah is a great comparison. In many ways, the Houthis are following the Hezbollah model, but in a much more strategically significant location. Hezbollah can threaten Israel's northern border, but the Houthis can threaten the entire global energy market. If they were to successfully strike a major oil terminal in Saudi Arabia again, or if they managed to truly shut down the Bab el-Mandeb for a prolonged period, we would see oil prices skyrocket overnight. They are a non-state actor with the strategic leverage of a major oil-producing nation.
And that brings us to the second-order effects. This is not just about the cost of shipping. It is about the loss of confidence in the international order. If a group like the Houthis can defy the United States and the combined naval power of the West for years on end, it sends a message to every other non-state actor and revisionist power in the world. It shows that the old rules of maritime security, which were guaranteed by American naval hegemony, are no longer being enforced. We are entering an era of contested commons.
It is the end of the era of uncontested American naval hegemony. We are moving into a multipolar maritime world where local actors can create no-go zones, and the Houthis are the ones who wrote the blueprint for this. They showed that you do not need to win a naval battle, you just need to make the risk of transit higher than the profit of the voyage. Once the insurance companies start raising their rates or refusing to cover ships in the Red Sea, the battle is effectively won. The Houthis did not have to sink the entire US Navy, they just had to scare the underwriters at Lloyd's of London.
I was looking at the insurance premiums for Red Sea transits, and they have gone up by something like 1,000% since this started. For some companies, it is just not worth it anymore. They would rather take the long way around Africa. That is a massive victory for the Houthis. They have achieved a strategic objective without ever having to engage in a traditional military confrontation. They have effectively decoupled the Red Sea from the global trade network.
And the human cost within Yemen is often overlooked in this geopolitical analysis. The Houthis are diverting resources from a starving population to fuel their military machine. They have created a war economy that benefits their leadership while the average Yemeni is struggling to find food and clean water. But as long as they can point to their victories against the Zionist entity, they can maintain a level of popular support, or at least popular compliance. It is a grim trade-off, global relevance at the cost of domestic misery.
It is a dark irony. The group that claims to be fighting for the oppressed is presiding over one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. But from their perspective, the struggle against Israel and the West is paramount. It is a totalizing worldview, and that is why I do not think we will see a return to normalcy in the Red Sea anytime soon. Even if there is a ceasefire in Gaza, the Houthis have realized the leverage they have. Why would they give that up? They have found a way to make the world listen to them, and they are not going to stop talking.
They have tasted global relevance. They have forced the world to pay attention to them. They are not going back to being a local mountain insurgency. They want to be recognized as the legitimate government of Yemen, and they are using their control of the Red Sea as a bargaining chip to get that recognition. The international community is in a bind. Do you reward their aggression by recognizing them, or do you continue a low-level conflict that is bleeding the global economy? The February peace talks showed that the world is leaning toward the former, simply out of exhaustion.
It is a classic dilemma, and there are no easy answers. The PLC, the official government, is trying to argue that the only way to stop the Houthi threat is to support a ground offensive to retake the coast. But after years of stalemate, there is very little appetite in Washington or Riyadh for a major escalation on the ground in Yemen. Everyone is looking for a technological or diplomatic silver bullet that just does not exist. The West is trying to solve a political problem with interceptor missiles, and it is not working.
And that is why we call it a forever war in the Red Sea. It is a low-intensity conflict that can go on indefinitely because the cost of entry for the Houthis is so low. They can keep launching a few drones a week for years. They have the manufacturing base, they have the terrain, and they have the ideological commitment. They have turned the Red Sea into a laboratory for asymmetric warfare, and the rest of the world is struggling to keep up with the results.
So, Herman, what are the practical takeaways for our listeners? If you are looking at this from a security or economic perspective, What should you be watching for as we move through 2026?
Well, first, I think we have to accept that the democratization of precision strike is a permanent reality. We need to rethink maritime security architecture from the ground up. We cannot rely on multi-million-dollar interceptors to fight $1,000 drones. We need directed energy weapons, better electronic warfare, and more autonomous defensive systems. The technology that the Houthis are using is only going to get cheaper and more accessible. We are going to see the Houthi model replicated in other choke points, like the Strait of Malacca or the Strait of Hormuz.
And on the geopolitical side, I think we have to watch those peace talks very closely. If the world moves toward a formal partition of Yemen, it would be a massive win for the Houthis and for Iran. It would provide them with a permanent, sovereign base of operations on one of the world's most important shipping lanes. That would have implications for decades to come. It would mean that a non-state actor successfully used asymmetric warfare to force a change in international borders and maritime law.
Definitely. And for anyone interested in the technical details of how these missile systems work, I really recommend going back to episode 941. We broke down the specific Iranian designs, like the Samad and the Kasef, that form the backbone of the Houthi arsenal. It gives you a much better sense of why they are so hard to intercept and how they have been modified for the Yemeni theater.
And if you want the broader context of how this fits into the regional maritime strategy, episode 1130 on Israel's pivot to Somaliland is a great companion piece to this discussion. It shows how other actors are trying to adapt to the reality the Houthis have created. Israel is essentially trying to build a new maritime security architecture that bypasses the Houthi-controlled areas entirely.
It is a fascinating, if sobering, topic. The Houthis have proved that in the 21st century you do not need a superpower's budget to have a superpower's impact. They have fundamentally changed the rules of the game. They have shown that a motivated group with access to dual-use technology and a strategic location can hold the global economy at gunpoint.
They really have. And I think we're going to be talking about the Houthi model for a long time. It is the new blueprint for regional insurgencies. Use a local cause to gain power. Use asymmetric technology to threaten global interests. And use a popular regional narrative to silence dissent. It is a very effective and very dangerous strategy that challenges the very foundations of the international order.
Well, I think we have covered a lot of ground today. From the mountains of Sada to the shipping lanes of the Red Sea, the story of the Houthis is really the story of the modern Middle East. It is complex, it is multi-layered, and it is far from over. We are watching a new type of state being born in the middle of a global trade war.
And we want to thank Daniel for sending in this prompt. It gave us a chance to really dive into something that is often oversimplified in the media. This is not just about drones and missiles. It is about the future of Yemen and the future of global trade. It is about how power is projected in an age where the old rules no longer apply.
If you found this episode helpful or interesting, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and allows us to keep doing these deep dives into the weird and complex prompts that come our way. We rely on your support to keep the lights on and the drones, well, the metaphorical drones, flying.
Yeah, your feedback means a lot to us. We have been doing this for over 1,300 episodes now, and it is the engagement from the listeners that keeps us going. You can find all of our past episodes, including the ones we referenced today, at myweirdprompts.com. We have a full archive there, and you can subscribe via RSS if you want to make sure you never miss an episode.
And if you are on Telegram, search for My Weird Prompts to join our channel. We post every time a new episode drops, and it is a great way to stay updated on the latest developments in the Red Sea and beyond. We are also on Spotify, of course, and most other major podcast platforms.
We will be back soon with another exploration of a weird prompt. There is always something new to learn, and we are glad to have you along for the journey. Whether it is deep sea exploration or the future of asymmetric warfare, we are here to break it down.
This has been My Weird Prompts. I am Herman Poppleberry.
And I am Corn Poppleberry. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will talk to you next time.
See you then.
So, Herman, before we go, I was thinking about that AI-assisted targeting we mentioned. Do you think we are going to see that become standard for all non-state actors? I mean, if the Houthis can do it, what stops a group in the Sahel or Southeast Asia from doing the same?
Oh, absolutely. Once the code is out there, it is impossible to put it back in the bottle. We are entering an era where the software is just as important as the hardware. You do not need a PhD in physics to operate these things anymore. You just need a good algorithm and a stable internet connection to download the latest updates.
It is a brave new world for sure. A world where the Gate of Tears is living up to its name more than ever. Anyway, thanks again for listening, everyone. Take care of yourselves out there.
Goodbye for now.
You know, I was just thinking about the Zaidi revivalist movement again. It is incredible how a group that started out just trying to preserve their religious identity against Saudi influence ended up being the ones who redefined global shipping. It is a reminder that local grievances can have global consequences.
It shows the power of a motivated minority with a clear goal. They were focused on survival, and they realized that in the modern world, survival requires power projection. They did not just want to be left alone in the mountains, they wanted to be the ones who decide who gets to pass through the sea.
And they certainly found a way to project it. It is a long way from the mountains of Sahara to the deck of a commercial tanker in the Bab el Mandeb. It is a journey that has changed the map of the world.
It really is. And it is a journey that is still being written. We will be watching to see what the next chapter holds.
All right, we should probably wrap this up. We have been talking for quite a while, and I can see the shipping data updating on my screen again.
Agreed. There is always more to say, but we will leave some for the next 1300 episodes.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks again, everyone.
Talk to you soon.
This has been My Weird Prompts.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weirding.